So when it comes to BMX brake pads, I never thought that I could have a video this long about them. But in this video, we talk super in-depth about everything that you could possibly want to learn or know about a brake pad in BMX. And if you don't want that, there is a shorter version of this with just the basics that you need to know in purchasing brake pads for your bike that you can go and watch right now. It's linked in the description. But if you want to nerd out with me about brake pads and learn everything about them, compounds, fasteners, everything that I've known about brake pads my entire life, stay tuned for this one and let's dive in. So to start off and to just show you how much there actually is to talk about with brake pads, I went online to research the different compounds that brake pads can be made of and found a really convenient page on the Cool Stop website with their different brake compounds. And I figured it'd be a great place to start in showing just how much variety there can be in such a simple product. So first off, let's just take a look at how many options there are. Look at all of these different options. Yes, in BMX, we only use a couple of these conventionally, but let's just go through here and talk about them. So first on their list is Salmon. They're Cool Stop's most famous compound, and they say that it's their most aggressive compound, or one of the most aggressive compounds for extreme all-weather conditions, especially in the wet, but still superb in the dry. I know a lot of people like the compound brake pads because they like their stopping power, but without the squeal of something like a clear brake pad. Then we've got Black, our standard compound, which is great for all weather conditions, but designed for dry condition riding. Black is another one that people use when they don't want their brakes to squeal. Personally, I've used both of these and I feel clear is way better in all scenarios, but that's my personal preference. Then we've got Colors. Their colored pads are a semi-aggressive compound that will give you good performance in all weather conditions. This includes all the colors available and excludes talking about just these shapes in general because these shoe brake pads don't work very good. I've tried them before on somebody's bike. Then they've got dual compound brake pads, a fusion of Black and Salmon that are supposed to give you superb braking in all weather conditions. Combination produces a more controlled, smooth stop. Then they have triple compound where there's, it looks like it's just Black with Salmon on the middle, and then electric. Higher speeds and weights of electric bikes. That's interesting. Then Clear. This is an extreme compound for only experienced trick or trails riders needing a compound that will instantly lock all wheels. It's pretty self-explanatory after that paragraph. I personally like Clear, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Then they've got all these specialty compounds for specialty rims, composite, CFL, carbon. So there are specialty brake pads for carbon rims. That's something to consider as well. Carbon 2, carbon wheels designed to withstand those fast, steep descents without a lot of pad wear. And then 1003 CX, 1003R, ceramic. Chromium compound designed for ceramic coated rims and is great in all weather conditions. And then Rigida, I'm not even sure what that means. Carbide coated rims. I'm not sure, but this just goes to show that there are a ton of different compound options. And when you see brake pads of different colors, one thing I didn't see was the green compound. I didn't see the green one on here. That is a compound that a lot of people talk about in BMX as well. But it just goes to show that when you see these colors of brake pads when you're at the bike shop or looking online, those colors do actually mean something and are to be considered whenever you're buying a brake pad. And reading these and talking about the different compounds and how they work on BMX bikes is something that you should think about whenever you're deciding what you want. And mainly it's the difference between your brakes squealing and not squealing. And this is a perfect place too to introduce rims and talk about how they factor into this equation as well. So some rims have different coatings on them, like the Alienation Vandal rim has a coating that makes it work better with brakes. There's also different materials of rims when it comes to if they're painted, if they're a raw aluminum, if they are chromed, and that has an impact on your brakes. A lot of people forever in BMX have sworn by chrome rims with black or salmon pads. They like that they don't make as much noise but stop really well, and when you keep your rim clean and your pads clean, it makes your brakes work pretty well. Well, then introducing painted rims, anodized rims, that can make your brakes not work as good with these compounds. So that is where clear brake pads come in, and clear brake pads definitely tend to work better in more scenarios when it comes to, like, if your rim is painted, anodized, whatever it might be. Clear can be helpful for there, but that can introduce some noise. Then we talk about clear pads on chrome rims and whatever else you might need, or putting things on your rim to make them work, make your brakes work better. And there's just a lot to talk about with this, and it's stuff that we will get to. But personally, I like to use the Alienation Vandal rim with a clear brake pad. It works great for me. And then there's something that I put onto my rim that's in here that we'll talk about more at the end of the video. And honestly, the stuff, in this right here, let me just pull it out. This right here makes my brakes work the best ever for tricks that I need my brakes to stop on a dime instantly, no movement of the rim whatsoever. And I need to know and be confident that that rim is stopping for that trick. There's several of them that I do that when that happens, it makes the trick work 10 times easier. And so it's something to consider in this journey. And if you are here just like, man, I just want to stop, well, then you could probably just pick a brake pad and a rim and be okay with just stopping. But if you want to do brake tricks, or you're thinking about that, just keep watching to learn more about brake pads. Now let's go ahead and talk about the makeup and components of a brake pad itself. So now we've talked about brake compounds and all of the different situations and circumstances that might affect your choice in brake pad compound. Let's talk about the brake pads themselves. So the brake pads themselves are made up of a few different components. We can see here we have two very different looking brake pads in terms of how they actually connect to the bike. But before we talk about this, let's talk about these little spacers that we see here, because these spacers actually can have a difference. So as we can see on this brake pad here, we have a skinnier spacer against the brake pad and then a thicker one out here by the nut that screws it on. And this is one of those things that I definitely overlooked talking about when it came to brake pads and made me want to have this conversation in the first place. And when we take a look at it, yeah, it might seem inconsequential at first, but the reason why these exist are for different scenarios where your brakes are set up in different ways. For example, if my finger is the rim and this is the brake pad and it is against the rim right now, and we have this skinny spacer on the inside, that means we have no choice in our adjustment process but to adjust our brakes, either the cable or some other barrel adjuster adjustment that we have, so that we can get some extra cable out of there and pull it further away. But on the flip side, if we had a brake pad that had the thicker spacer on the inside, like this one, and we were against the rim, we could simply just take this spacer off and put the skinnier one on the inside like this, and that would pull it away as well, because it would put the thicker spacer on the outside of the brake arm, just like this one is how it's set up now, and put the skinnier one in there. And doing that would give you basically the amount of space that is the difference between the skinnier and thicker. And a real quick pro tip here for anyone who wants to be a super tinkerer when putting your brakes on: if you put that thicker spacer on the inside so that it takes up more room, and you set your brakes up so that all of your barrel adjusters are tightened all the way down, and you put this brake pad against the rim, that means that when you're done, all of your setup should be identical, whether it's a straight cable or dual lowers or whatever it is, and that when you switch the thicker pad for the skinnier one and put the skinnier one on the inside, it'll pull that pad away from the rim and give you what should be close to perfect spacing, and it should be very, very close to dialed in that way. Another factor having to do with these little spacers is that they affect where your brake arm is in the process as well. If you have the thicker spacer on the inside and you set it up so that it's lined up where you want it to be, That means that your brake arm is going to be a little bit further out, which puts the brake arm down a little bit. And when it's further down like that and you pull on it, you get more leverage than when it's further up and further pulled already, and then you pull on it. And I have an entire video about maximizing your brakes that talks a lot about this, as well as the physics that have to do with it. So you can watch that for more information. And so you may have noticed in talking about these thicker and skinnier spacers that there are rounded washers or spacers in here as well. Let's just go ahead and take these off to talk about them. I'll get rid of this little one here and let's take a look. So we can see here that this one has a rounded surface to it, and this one has a surface that accepts that roundness, convex and concave. They go together, and what we can notice is that when they go together, they can move like this. And so I've went ahead and grabbed an Alienation vice grip brake arm here to demonstrate why. So obviously these aren't the pads that come on these, but I'm using these right now, and I figured I would just keep using them to give you the demonstration. So we're gonna put it all back together here. Just gonna tighten this down a little bit to where we can still move it. And basically the reasoning for those convex and concave spacers is that so you are able to move where your pads sit. So you can see here, they're pivoting, and it's allowing me to move this pad not only this direction so that we can align it with the parallel of our rim, but also this direction. So if we go vertical here from the bottom, we can see it a little better. We can see that it also allows you to go this direction. So not only are we able to adjust this angle, but we're also able to adjust this angle. And when we do that, it allows you to both get the brake pad parallel to the rim as you want it, and also keep it perfectly parallel in this regard, or toe it in or toe it out, depending upon what you might want to do. And I'm not gonna lie, towing in and towing out is something that I have never done in my entire BMX life. But I know that one of them is a way that can allow you to have less squeaking with your brakes because you tow it in the direction that your rim goes in and is rotating clockwise like this. Let's just pretend this is our rim. And so that when we slowly pull our brakes, this end hits first, starting to slow it down, and then by the time that end hits, it grabs it. And I've heard that there really isn't a reason to tow it the other direction, because why would you want to tow it and have this side hit first and then that side as you pull it? Doesn't really make sense in my head either. And honestly, all I've ever done in BMX is wanted to get it perfectly parallel to the rim so that we can have that clapping of the brake pad against the rim. And I personally just like my brakes to instantly stop and be there and feel as most rock solid as possible. And when you tow the brake pads and you have one side hit first, it definitely is something that translates into your brake lever and doesn't feel quite as rock solid like they're stopping instantly. All right, and setting the Alienation vice grip brake arm aside, which these are available now, 7 series aluminum. There are bearings in them right here for smoother pivot. And the brass thing on here I noticed is super thick. They are compatible with very wide tires, and I have a full video about them you can watch on my channel. But now that we've learned about all of the different components of brake pads, let's talk a little bit more about how some of them attach, because as we can see here, I have 4 different brake pads right here, and actually all 4 of them attach in a different way. These 2 are similar, these 2 are kind of similar, and these 3 are similar, and they're all similar in their compound. So let's break down the intricacies of this, starting with the male studded brake pads, which means we just get rid of this one. And you may be wondering, what the heck? But this one is actually a male studded brake pad. And what I mean by that is just simply that we have a male threaded stud in the brake pad itself that has a nut that tightens onto it. And now, just for the sake of showing you the difference, this is a female brake pad in that this isn't a stud, it is a bolt that goes into the brake pad itself. How this one is a male studded brake pad is actually pretty unique compared to the others in that it has a smaller stud on it, but this custom nut that gives you a more low profile appearance on the bike. So we're gonna set these two aside, knowing that they are different, but let's talk about these now. So these ones are pretty similar in the fact that they're both clear brake pads. They both are male studded, but one has a different style nut on it. So obviously this nut is a more conventional 6-hex nut that uses a wrench like a crescent wrench, or I think this is 10 millimeters to tighten it down. This one, exact same thing, except for instead of a crescent wrench or a 10 millimeter, you use a 5 millimeter Allen wrench to tighten this one down, just like this. Now, they are interchangeable, so let's say you have a brake pad that you want to use one or the other on. They are the exact same thread pitch, so you can literally switch them if you wanted to. And aside from that, the only real differences are potentially in some compound differences as well as the thickness of them. And that's something to consider as well, but we'll talk about that in a second. So now, let's compare these. Obviously, you could probably get it by now. One is male, one is female, but both have low profile bolts and a nut on them. And aside from that, they're pretty similar. This one has a plastic piece on it that the clear compound brake pad connects into, and this one is a hovering metal piece inside the compound itself. These two are also, the entire brake stud system here is hovered in the compound, and then it's made that way. So there is differences there as well. But for all intents and purposes, these two are very similar. They just tighten on there in a slightly different way. And actually they both do use a 5 millimeter Allen as well, if I can find it here. So 5 millimeter Allen is used to tighten this one and to tighten this one onto the bike. So when it comes to the brake pads, those are the differences in how they're actually made and how they're put on there. And to be totally honest, I haven't found a ton of a difference in these other than when you look at things like the thickness of material and how long they last. Pretty much an obvious thing. I have just found that I like a brake pad that has a really thick material on it. I used to use these Eclat Force pads, one because they were female and two because they had so much material on them, meaning that they lasted a long time. These ones appear to have even more material on them than the Eclat Force. Like if I line up about where the last usable spot is on these brake pads and you look at them in comparison, there's probably another millimeter of material on these. Another option I want to talk about at this point in the video as well are the Odyssey Ghost pads. These pads don't have any of the spacers that we've been talking about. They're natively towed in, and there's 3 different compound options for them as well. So basically when it comes to the Odyssey Ghost pads, you just pick the compound that you want, black, red being kind of like the salmon, and clear being normal clear, and then you put them on your bike, line them up with the rim, and they're good to go. You don't have to worry about towing. You don't have to worry about whether or not they're parallel with the sidewall of your rim or anything like that. They're designed to basically just go on and ride. I've personally ridden the Ghost pads, and they work okay for stopping, and my buddy Sponge uses them for all kinds of brake tricks. But for the types of instant stopping tricks that I like to do, I prefer more of something like what we've been talking about throughout the video so far. There's one more thing that I figured we could talk about with this that doesn't have to do with brake pads directly, but still has a lot to do with brakes. And that are different things that you can do to make your brakes work better. For example, I have in my pocket here some brake tar from my buddy Chi up in Canada. Amazing brake rider. He's the one who introduced this to me. And putting it on your rim, no matter what pad you have, no matter what rim you have or what your setup is, makes your brakes lock up instantly if you want them to. And I love that. People throughout the years have used Simple Green. There's brake riders that have been yelling that at their screen while watching this the entire time up until me mentioning it now. People have also used hot glue and just rubbed that on their rim as well. I used to use that with great results, and then there came a day where it just stopped working for me. Don't know why. Cut it off with a razor blade, put it back on, still stopped working, changed brake pads out. I don't know what it was. And when I found brake tar, it's just the best stuff ever. So if that's what you're looking for there, you can use those and consider those things. But ultimately, I feel that when we're talking about brake pads, and if you're new to BMX brakes, or you're just trying to learn more, figure out what you need, the two things that I think you should consider most are the compound of the brake pad in relation to the rim that you have, as well as the fastening method on your bike. So personally, I like to use clear brake pads like these with low profile fastening methods like the ones that we've talked about here. I do not like using this style brake pad anymore, simply because this part right here or this part right here destroy my shoes and my pants, and it's very easy to see why when we compare how much further they stick out than the other options. And I personally come to enjoy the sound of clear brake pads with the brake tar on my rim, so it's something that I don't mind. But if that's something that you care about, go back to the compound section after learning about the fastening method and just make your choice from there. But with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and learned something. I did not think I could talk for this long about brake pads and everything to do with them, but here we are. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did and you want to support me or my channel in some way, there's a bunch of discount codes and links in the description down below that when you use them, it saves you money and helps me out at the same time. Let me know your thoughts on brake pads, which ones you choose in the comments down below, and if there's something I should explain next that I haven't in this playlist, let me know. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.